Before we get into the intro today, I have to tell you guys about this awesome chance to save some money on the upcoming Pacific Bitcoin Festival happening on October 5th and 6th out in Los Angeles. If you click the link below in the show notes, you get a 21% discount on the event tickets. And the best part is you don't even have to worry about remembering a promo code because the link will automatically apply the discount at checkout. Guys, I have to say that honestly, this might be one of the better events to be going to this year, because not only will you be surrounded people like Lynn Alden, Greg Foss, Preston Pish, etc., but this one is actually one of those affordable events in the space that you can go to where it's not going to cost you thousands of dollars just to get a ticket like some of the other Bitcoin events. So go and click the link below, get your tickets to Pacific Bitcoin, and when you do, please reach out to me. I'd love to hang out with you guys in person. I'd love to get a real-life happy hour set up to chat and hang out with you guys more. So I hope that I can see you guys there. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's release of the Hashrate Happy Hour Podcast. Today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Adam Sullivan, the CEO of Core Scientific. Adam, honestly, is one of the sharpest and smartest guys I've met, and he does an absolutely phenomenal job walking through Core Scientific's site diversification strategy and how that overlaps heavily with their power strategy. We also talk about things like Core's R&D team, how they work with the power companies to establish the most mutually beneficial structures possible, and what the future of Core Scientific looks like. Again, Adam is a wealth of knowledge and extremely well-spoken, and this is an episode that you really don't want to miss. Today's podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, the Texas Blockchain Council, a Bitcoin-first nonprofit industry organization working to make Texas the jurisdiction of choice for Bitcoin mining and blockchain innovation. They will be hosting North America's premier policy conference for Bitcoin and the digital asset ecosystem on November 15th through the 17th in Fort Worth, Texas. For more information, please visit their website at texasblockchaincouncil.org. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Like I said in the introduction, I'm here with Adam Sullivan, the CEO at Core Scientific. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. Looking forward to it. This one should be fun.
This is going to be a blast. And have to kick this one off with a congratulations with the big title change, the big CEO role. Congratulations. That's exciting.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. I look forward to working with the rest of the team here and building a bigger company here. This should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be fun for people like myself to watch you guys, really blow this thing out of the water. Especially, let's just hope for that next Bitcoin bull run. It'll be fun to watch. So Adam, I always like to kind of paint a backdrop for the audience. I like to hear my guests' background and where they're coming from. And then how does that lead you into this crazy world of Bitcoin mining? Because it's a wild world. So I'd love to maybe start there if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent the last decade in financial services, mainly in investment banking with a focus on digital assets and infrastructure. I previously served as managing director and head of digital assets and infrastructure at XMS Capital. I led numerous M&A and capital raises for the Bitcoin mining industry in particular, actually including Core Scientific's combination with Power and Digital Infrastructure Acquisition Corp, XPDI. I actually started mining on my own in 2016 while I was working for a hedge fund in New York, but it was ETH mining, as I could assemble the rigs myself. I actually had a few of them. I actually had a few of them running in my apartment, which was always a fun conversation with the utility. Being told I was consuming more power than my building and the building next door was definitely an interesting conversation to have. It wasn't until later. Yeah, it wasn't until later that year that I saw my first Bitcoin mining unit, and I really fell in love with the industry. I decided I wanted to get into the industry full time, and that was when I made the shift to XMS. We started the first crypto-focused investment banking group on Wall Street, and actually our main focus was helping non-crypto publicly traded companies evaluate opportunities in the crypto space. Back then, it was still kind of early innings of the industry, and so there was a lot of exploration going on. I would say by 2018, I decided that I really wanted to focus back on mining since it was what I liked best. And so I went on a tour. I went around the US. I looked at operations. And at the time, back in 2018, large operations were really only 5 to 10 megawatts, and they were
Yeah.
mainly revitalizing old manufacturing facilities. And it was awesome to see. And that was it. I was really hooked on Bitcoin mining ever since.
Wow. Well, I love you started mining out of your apartment. That's yeah, I'm sure that definitely raised some eyebrows. I'm sure the landlord was like, "What in earth is going on
Well,
there?"
yeah.
Uh,
The first question they asked was, "We think your meter's broken." I was like, "It could be. You should come check it out." I was
yeah, you
hoping
should
for that
probably
one free
take a look
power
at
bill.
that. Yeah, yeah, you should probably come check that out. It's
Yeah.
probably broken. Probably on your end. I have to kind of scratch an itch real quick before we kind of continue on in the conversation. So you mentioned that you were like doing the evaluations on like crypto projects, Bitcoin projects. Um, I have a fascination with like modeling for Bitcoin mining. Was that something that you were working on as well? Like being able to compare basically an apple to an apple when looking at like one site compared to another site. Do you ever do any work like that?
Oh yeah, we did a significant amount of work around actually building a lot of the early models for Bitcoin mining companies. That was really one of the hallmarks of our team. Was we had some of the best models in the industry, and we did a lot of evaluation. We worked with a lot of folks who were doing RFPs, trying to find new sites and working with power companies. And so really early on, we were developing some of the earliest models in the industry to help folks compare, two different sites, different types of power contracts, different types of economics of, what does it cost to actually renovate this facility into something that can produce Bitcoin? I think that was probably a more difficult question in the beginning because, like I mentioned, it was all revitalization of old manufacturing facilities, old paper mills, old
Yeah.
steel mills. It was not purpose built facilities. That was not something that was really being built yet. And so for us, it was a lot more of a hands on approach. We were walking into old paper mills where there was still paper on the desks from the paper mill companies.
Wow.
And it was interesting because you walk into an old Alcoa facility, you walk into an old paper mill, they just got up and left. They left the papers on the table. Their calendar, from 2003 was still sitting on the table. And you're like, oh, this is interesting. But that was what was probably the best part about it. You had the opportunity to walk into these old facilities, and sometimes you're being walked around with the previous plant manager who said, my job's to make sure no one breaks in and no one camps out. And so I do have to do a daily walkthrough of this facility. And then suddenly they're back in a full-time job helping Bitcoin miners restructure their old plant. And for me, that was just such a unique opportunity to see all of these different facilities being revitalized and really bringing back jobs to a lot of communities that you could tell were hurting from the fact that a major employer in that area had left. And it was kind of overnight for a lot of these places.
Absolutely. I imagine we'll probably touch on, a bit of that with, because the next question I want to talk to you about is, who is Core Scientific, and have you kind of run through like who you guys are? I imagine part of that story is going to be the positive economic impact that you guys bring to the communities that you're operating in. So maybe Adam, why don't you walk us through who is Core Scientific? What are you guys working on, and how are you guys doing what you're doing?
Sure. So Core Scientific's a leader in transforming energy into high value compute. Today, that's primarily to produce Bitcoin for ourselves and our hosting customers. We have 7 facilities across 5 states. We're the most productive North American operator at scale. We have 15 exahash of self-mining. That was as of July, and we had mined nearly 8,800 Bitcoin to date. We also host miners that produce other digital assets, and we have extensive experience operating AI and HPC infrastructure, which is a really unique capability set for our team. I think that's part of the story that has been told to date.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we'll kind of come back into, a little bit more of, what Core is working on as you guys start to look to the future. But I actually want to bring you back. You just mentioned something that's impressive as hell. Seven facilities, 5 states. You guys are operating in. Are you in every grid system in the U.S.? Is it?
I like to say, we tried to cover every potential environmental zone that the United States had to offer.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. So I kind of want to double click on that a little bit and maybe just go a little deeper. Talk to me about the contrast about operating, like you're down in Texas and ERCOT, you're up in the Midwest. I believe it's North Dakota.
We are in North Dakota.
Yep. So maybe talk to me about some of the contrast that you guys see across those different power markets.
Yeah. I mean, for us, geographic distribution, I think it gives us a unique advantage when it comes to maximizing uptime and profitability. High temperatures in one market may require that you power down one facility, but doesn't affect the rest of the fleet. So for us, having distribution across multiple power markets also means curtailments are spread across different time periods. And we look at uptime on a fleet-wide basis and allowing us to spread those curtailments, those high temperature curtailments across different time periods to create a more stable operating environment, creates a higher efficiency across the fleet. And so I think this actually is a unique strategy to Core, given our geographic distribution throughout the United States. And I mentioned, it's across, I think, every environmental zone you could possibly cover in the US. Mm-hmm. But most miners today have a significant amount of concentration risk in one power market. And so it actually changes our strategy a bit, and I'll come back to the power side of it, but it changes our strategy a bit from having to constantly race to the lowest machine efficiency to us being able to arbitrage our machines across a portfolio of facilities, all with different power economics. So for us, this actually results in a longer machine refresh cycle because we're able to allocate machines to different facilities based on the power contracts, which actually results in lower CapEx. And so we actually plot our facilities along what we call the efficient frontier of power. And so it's the trade-off of power prices to intermittency. You're essentially willing to accept more intermittency for cheaper power. And so for us, we've worked on having the best software capabilities that allow you to curtail. And most people say that's an ERCOT focused thing. But most people don't realize it's also really important for the regulated markets, because the regulated markets have their own programs as well for curtailment, that you need to have similar capabilities to the curtailments that are required by ERCOT. Yeah. So when we think about the fleet management side, it's participating in as many of the curtailment programs that are available in the regulated markets, while looking at how to maximize profitability in those markets. So we're not participating in every curtailment program, but we're participating in the ones that allow us to maximize the profitability of the machines that we're dedicating to that facility. And then for ERCOT, it's such a more active process for us. We're having a consistent dialogue with our power company, and it's an extraordinarily, shortened window for the information flow. That information flow comes through in seconds in terms of when we need to curtail, when do we need to power down, when do we need to power back up. And it's to ensure that we can respond not only to the programs that we're participating in, but also to respond to the economic changes on the grid, for example, higher power prices. And so for us, we look at this on a fleet-wide basis, and we're constantly trying to manage the different power markets exposure, but we operate that by allocating our machines based on efficiency to those different facilities in order to maximize the profitability of our fleet.
Oh, that's so unique, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because I mean, that's just such an awesome glimpse behind the curtain of like how you guys are evaluating sites, geographies, the fleet, and then you wrap all that up. I mean, what I love about the Bitcoin mining industry is how complex and how like just strategic it can get. So I really appreciate that. That's pretty cool. So you touched on it a little bit, the power strategy. You have several different power strategies going on. Maybe speak to what the relationships look like with these power companies, how that ties back to your power strategy. That's going to be very different down in ERCOT versus, up here on MISO and and PGAM. And so it's maybe touch on that a little bit too.
Yeah. For us, I mean, we're one of the largest consumers of power in numerous markets that we operate in today. And so we have to look at all of our relationships with the utilities as partnerships. And it's been a continuous iteration process between Core and the power companies, because we have to have a mutually beneficial relationship for both of us to be successful. I think at different parts in a market cycle, you'll see one or two power companies, try to come in with a bit of a greedy mindset. But I think we've been lucky so far to find partners that understand this is a really cyclical business and you need structures that work for all market environments. Otherwise, it doesn't work for both companies. So as an early player in the space, Core worked with numerous large utilities to educate them in the industry. I've reviewed, I think, more presentations than I can count at this point from before I joined the company that outline the benefits of Bitcoin miners on the grid. I got to say, many of those utility providers we ended up not working with, but Core wants to be a good steward for the industry. We want to ensure that we're providing the best information to the utility providers as possible. And, we're still not at a place today where I think it's universally understood the benefits we can provide to the grid, such as the ability to curtail on a moment's notice or how we can assist in grid stability. So our hope is that we can provide a significant amount of education to power companies so that we can have deeper relationships with them. We have a very deep relationship with our power providers today. We meet with them at least monthly. In some cases, it's weekly. They meet with our engineering team. They meet with our software teams. They want to understand how deep our capabilities are, how responsive we can be, how resilient our facilities are, what type of operating temperatures we can operate in. And I think more often than not, they're surprised at how quickly we can innovate, how quickly we can develop new capabilities in the software side. And for us, that's deepened our relationships with all these power companies.
I can't even imagine. Yeah, I'm sure, just the strength of those relationships, because I kind of stumbled my way through a project in Minnesota with a power company. I look back on that experience, and my focus at the time was, cheap power. And, to hear, how you guys come in, you put together presentations to help educate, help walk through. I mean, that all goes such a long way. And I mean, look at the size of your guys' portfolio of assets. I mean, you guys have a lot of power that you guys command. So that's awesome. You said monthly meetings, sometimes weekly meetings. Are you able to kind of pull the curtain back on like what are you guys kicking around in those meetings? I don't know if you can speak to that, but
no, I mean, I think a lot of that comes back to what capabilities we built on the software side. That's a lot of the questions around how fast can you curtail. If we build a program that allows you to curtail, and we can call upon you in, X number of minutes, is this something that you're capable of? And for us, unlike a lot of other Bitcoin miners, we roll out a list of all of the programs that we participate in, what the requirements are for those programs. And so it's an open conversation that we're always willing to have with utility providers. We're not doing this for the first time. We have 7 facilities in 5 states, right? We've done this many times. We've had a lot of these conversations, and we're constantly evaluating opportunities with new utility providers and in new markets. Because for us, that perfect power relationship hasn't necessarily existed yet from the perspective of there's never been that perfect tailoring of programs for a Bitcoin miner. One day we may get there, but it's something where we think through constant iteration, constant education, and the new capabilities that we're constantly developing, we'll get there. We have high confidence that, one day the true benefits of what Bitcoin miners provide to the grid and can provide to the power companies as well, will be told to the general public. And I think that's when we know that we've finally made it as Bitcoin miners.
Yeah. It's and we'll start to see more of that hit, kind of the public. I think very slowly you're starting to see a narrative shift in, just as an example, the KPMG report that came out, kind of putting their stamp of approval, if you want to call it that, about Bitcoin mining as an asset to renewable generation.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to see it a little bit. Maybe, I guess kind of piggybacking off that, you guys do all this extensive work with power companies. You have a good track record to kind of put on the table. What is your approach, Core's approach to sourcing new sites? What are you guys looking for?
Yeah, so everything starts with power, right? We're in the power transformation business. So we have a checklist that kind of ticks through a few different areas. It starts with power prices, it touches on energy infrastructure, and then it comes down to some location specific attributes. So on power prices, the first question is, where do we fall on the efficient frontier of power prices intermittency? Are there benefits for having intermittent power? And the last question there is, do you have the capability to hedge? And if so, what are the costs associated with it? I think that's it's a much more straightforward question in places like ERCOT. In other markets, it's a much more opaque question, and you have to start looking at other types of hedging programs that aren't necessarily as straightforward as ERCOT is. On the energy infrastructure side, it's a much more multifaceted checklist. Are you connected to the grid, or are you behind the meter, or are you both? Those are all very important questions for a Bitcoin miner. Total power availability. What's the voltage of the power coming in at? And then for location, these are, some of these are qualitative, which is, is it regulatory friendly? What are the political risks long term in that location? I think this is an item that a lot of people overlook, but are there enough qualified workers to hire from? A lot of Bitcoin mining happens in rural areas. So you have to pay a lot of attention to what the local workforce looks like and what that composition is. And then lastly, you have to look at environmentals. Obviously we operate in a lot of different environmental zones across the US. So you have to make a decision on the infrastructure side when you're considering infrastructure costs. So is it immersion? Is it air cooled? Can you run both? These are all questions that you have to ask yourself. So for us, we've run numerous nationwide and international RFPs to assist with our site selection process. But for us, it's a constant process. We have to run it, every single day to ensure that we're uncovering any new opportunities that could provide us with some type of unique advantage. And those advantages could come from power pricing, or they could come from a build out perspective. And you have to always constantly be evaluating the trade-off between, short-term lower CapEx and long-term lower power prices. You have to constantly be evaluating the trade-off between, the CapEx and long-term operating costs of a site.
Yeah. And again, that was such a phenomenal walkthrough of just like your process. And I'm sure that's still even the 10,000 foot view on it. But it really shows, it really shows and demonstrates the level of, work and research you guys put into site selection. You mentioned behind the meter in there. I would be just curious to maybe get your take on behind the meter type partnerships, and maybe to clarity as to why I'm asking, I had Dan Roberts from Iris actually share a very interesting perspective that behind the meter is almost too risky of a proposition. So I'd be curious, are you guys looking at behind the meter type partnerships, and how do you think about that type of a scenario?
That's interesting. His thought process on that. I mean, for us, we think about a site from the first perspective of wanting to operate 100% uptime and then working back along that efficient frontier of power that I discussed earlier and thinking about the trade-off between power price and intermittency. So when you're considering behind the meter opportunities, the first item you have to consider is capacity factor, especially when thinking about behind the meter renewables. 30% capacity factor on the high end for solar means you're only receiving power 30% of the time. Wind, is about 45%. That type of uptime doesn't work as a standalone. So you have to make up for that other 55 to 70% of power. And that requires grid connection to make up for that additional downtime. And most renewable operations are not built to pull down that amount of additional power. So there's a lot of additional CapEx required alongside of the behind the meter renewables opportunity to achieve that type of relationship with a behind the meters renewable opportunity. So we're constantly evaluating them, but there are risks associated with it that are different from being grid connected. But there's definitely significant opportunity there, but it takes the right type of partnership out of the operator. And go back to renewables, I think that's where we're mostly seeing a lot of the behind the meter opportunities today.
Yeah.
But you have to be receiving the benefits of the behind the meter in order to execute on that type of opportunity and take on that type of risk. I just don't think today we've necessarily seen that right opportunity where you get the true partnership model, where you're getting the advantage of being behind the meter. I just don't think we've seen it yet.
I agree. And you sniffed it out pretty quick. Exactly. I think what Dan's perspective, as far as the risk on it, 40% capacity factor is, it's just not going to, the cost of power, even if it was free, it's still not going to really make up for that. So,
I think that the infrastructure part's often overlooked. They think you can just plug in at a renewable site, but it requires a significant amount of additional electrical infrastructure to build that capability into the site. And I think that's always the big surprise for people. They don't realize that you have to be grid connected and you have to build that connection to the grid and you have to get the approval from the grid to draw that additional power. And you have to draw up to what the total capacity that you're building at. And so there is additional associated costs with that.
Yeah. I think, the sophisticated groups, the big groups, I think they all get that. But yeah, it's, for people who are maybe just starting to, go from their garage or maybe a smaller, 5-10 megawatt operation to look at it, that's all stuff to consider because it'll sneak up on you. That's for sure. Yeah, it'll sneak up. So having conversations on the podcast and just my day job as well, starting to hear and see power prices kind of went up and then they stuck. Would love to get your take on like how you guys are thinking through kind of this new cost of power environment. And then maybe let me just really throw a curveball and make the question more complicated and say the cost of power going up plus the upcoming halving, so you've got a reduction in revenue, kind of an increased cost of power that, or at least the baseline seems to have elevated. I'd love your take on kind of both those things.
Yeah, I think let's start with the halving. The halving is not a one-time event. We've been through them before. From our perspective, it's a position that you have to take as a business at all times. And the main question you have to ask yourself going to a halving is, how do you manage the trade-off between your terahash exposure and then the efficiency of your machines compared to the market? So the first question you have to ask yourself is, when you're thinking about the halving, is how do you keep your machines online and how do you keep them profitable? So what we did, and this is associated with the power part of this question, we built our own internal tool. It utilizes forward power curves. It takes into account curtailment programs, weather data, and other variables, and it projects the profitability of all of our machines and identifies which location in our portfolio that they should go to based on that analysis. And so for us, it's a lot of moving machines to their best location. And so less efficient machines go to locations in our portfolio where we believe they'll continue to be profitable. And then we're locating the most efficient machines that give us the most stable uptime. And that's all to ensure that we're maximizing the profitability of our mining fleet. So for us, having all these facilities to optimize within and having the best software team in the industry has been a huge differentiator for us as we prepare for these, this different power environment, the upcoming halving. But for us, all of this is being loaded into our system that's giving us the analysis necessary to ensure that we have the most profitable company going into the halving.
Oh, that's what a fantastic tool. I mean, it's been in the space for a little over 3 years now, have, a very small little humble mining fleet of my own. And I'm kind of looking at this thing like I'm in a completely different position than Corp, but for me, it's kind of the first pass for me is like, well, just have a big enough reserve account to weather the reduction in my revenue until I can get through to, better Bitcoin pricing. But having a tool like that to optimize your fleet and the location of the fleet, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a necessary tool to have. We have over 200,000 machines operational today between us and our hosted clients. And it comes down to making data-driven decisions. And, it's hard to make the call if you're just looking at forward power curves, you're looking at potential moves in Bitcoin prices, and you have to make a call at one point and say, we have all of these variables. Let's build a tool that can drive our decision making and take all of these variables into account so that we can position ourselves for the worst market conditions. And if the market conditions are different, then that's fantastic. That's all gravy for us. But you have to be prepared for the downside. And so that's what we work towards, and that's what we have built internally to ensure that we're optimizing amongst all of the facilities. And as we grow our facility fleet, that question is going to become increasingly more complex, and you can't make those calls as an individual. You have to be taking all of the variables into account. And so there was a point in time for Core Scientific as a company where we had to say, let's start bringing all these variables together and making the best call we possibly can based on the data.
Yeah, that's the need for, and so let me back up. I think it's actually just a sign of, the maturity, within Core, within the industry as well. You see big data used all over different, matured industries. I think it's just kind of a sign of that. So it's cool to see that you guys you're already to that point. You're already utilizing that type of thing in-house. Another thing that kind of just popped into my head to hear when you were speaking to optimizing and making sure that you are prepared to weather all events. What do you think about owning like electrical generation assets? I mean, is that like, what do you think about that? Is that just crazy?
Is that in vogue again, Ben? that question's been in and out of vogue in the Bitcoin mining industry, at least as long as I've been in the industry.
Everyone wants to know. Everyone wants to know. Are the Bitcoin miners going to be generation asset owners?
Are we going to build our own nat gas generator?
Right.
I think for us, we look at this as knowing what we do best. And we know that power companies operate power gen better than we would. Owning and operating power gen assets is a completely different business than what we're in today. And it requires a significant amount of skill and expertise. And then it introduces more variables into the company in terms of our risk factor. I would say we're always open to conversations with power gen operators around mutually beneficial relationships. And given the pace at which we're moving towards kind of that optimal partnership with all of our utility providers, I would say, it's not on our roadmap today, but we can never rule it out, Ben. We can never rule it out.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, again, like you said, I think everyone's been asking it for forever. So it's just curious what your take on it was. So I appreciate you humoring that question. Maybe to kind of shift back to, future looking at Core. I'd love to just kind of walk through like what are you guys working on? It's been a little bit of a tough year. It's been a tough year. I'd love to hear what's the outlook. How are you guys, positioning yourselves to come out and really hit the ground running, and maybe touch on all that if you can.
Sure. I would say, kind of one of the hallmarks of Core Scientific is we're builders and we're innovators. So we're always working on new projects. We're the people tinkering in the dark on Saturday night, trying to build a better company here. I think if I go into any too much of specifics on some of the R&D projects that we're working on, my R&D team would chastise me if I revealed any spoilers. But I'll tell you, our team's been at this longer than any other company in this industry, which means we've learned a lot through our successes and a lot through our failures. To be successful in this industry, you have to be able to innovate and innovate quickly. And so for us, we're constantly innovating on the designs of our infrastructure and the designs of our software stack. We're constantly working on ways to improve our efficiency and build more resilient and responsive facilities. We've always prided ourselves on having the most efficient and responsive infrastructure and software as well. And given the innovation in the industry, I got to say, we're going to keep our foot on the gas here. We don't want to lose our market leadership in this area. And so we've been very focused on developing that next generation of infrastructure for this industry. I believe we will see significant changes in what facilities look like, both in size and the design style. And for us, we're working on what that future looks like. We think there's going to be a lot of changes, and it's mainly going to be based on a lot of the learnings from the past, 6 years, 7 years in this industry about how to make the best facility possible for this industry. Because there's been a lot of different styles that have been used, and we've all kind of centered around a pretty similar style. Do I think it's the most efficient today? No, I think we have a lot of room to grow. And so, we've been working on the infrastructure design and what that next gen data center design looks like for this industry. And then on the other side of it, we've been hyper focused on our software stack. Our software stack today can manage over 1 million machines, and that's internationally. And that forms one layer of a deep tech stack that we developed for this industry. We've been developing every component that's required to operate machines in this industry. And we have the best software team to prove it. So, we have some very interesting developments on the infrastructure side coming here shortly. But can't spoil all the hard work we're going through right now before the big reveal.
No, that's great. That type of teaser, if you will, I think that's great because it leaves just enough to the imagination. I'm so excited to see what you guys come out with. This not really a question, just more so like I also think it would be really cool to see some of the more stodgy, well-known, long time established like innovation companies. I'm coming from 3M. It's just, it'd be really cool to start seeing that type of cross collaboration, or maybe. So yeah, I think it'd be cool to see like incubator programs start coming out, things like that, to really help foster growth in this industry. So very excited to see what you guys come out with.
Yeah, I mean, our teams from IBM, Amazon, Microsoft, Equinix, we have people from all of the big companies that were builders and wanted to come to a place where they had a sandbox to build in.
Yep.
And so we gave them carte blanche and said, if you could build us the best facility you could possibly build, what would it look like? Don't take into consideration what we built in the past. We said it similarly on the software side. If you could build the most responsive technology, not considering any of the technology that's been developed so far, what would that tech stack look like?
Yeah.
And giving that type of open question to people who have a deep desire to innovate, it just spurs their imagination, and they come up with things that, a lot of people are so rooted in how it's been done in the past. But when you bring really talented people together and you say, start over.
Yep.
They feel this sense of pride in what they want to build, and they want to build something better than anyone else's build and take a completely different approach. And it's going to pay dividends for Core Scientific over the long term, bringing that type of talent into one place and allowing these people to bounce ideas off each other. It's completely unique to Core Scientific, and we're really excited about what we're going to be building here.
I think it's why you guys draw in top talent, to be honest. It's you guys really are empowering and enabling your employees to just hit home runs and to just really then go in and be able to put their name behind it. That's fantastic. So just to keep a tab on the time, this has been fantastic, but I don't want to take you too long here. So you actually mentioned it at the very beginning, and I'm going to bring you all the way back to it. If you were to craft like this perfect power company relationship or program for Bitcoin mining, what would that look like?
I think the key word for that would be partnership. I used that term earlier, but it would truly have to look like a partnership. And what I mean by that is a power company that wants to explore the depths of our capabilities, well, is very open about what their objectives and what their needs are, so that we can build programs, power programs that ensure the long-term success of both businesses. I think today we've been fortunate to build many strong relationships with power companies across the nation. And our most productive relationships to date act truly as partnerships from our perspective, where we've learned to work and grow collaboratively. We like to serve as a resource to utility providers so that we can pilot programs and test new software capabilities. And power companies are very open to learning about that. In return, the thing that we ask for from power companies is that we want to understand their business and learn about the nuances and we want them to learn about the nuances of things like the halving, right?
Yep.
And so we can work together on a collaborative plan. I think that's really one of the most important parts of a relationship between a power company and a Bitcoin miner, is that the Bitcoin miner understands the exposure and the risk and all of the different nuances that come alongside of operating a power company. And in return, we're asking the simple question of, be open to what we have to tell you about our industry, because our industry is constantly changing. Mm-hmm. And it's, we have different machine efficiencies, we have different exposures. And so the perfect power company relationship would be one of openness in terms of a business model. And it would be openness about our capabilities and also about how we can work collaboratively to meet their goals and objectives so that we can build a long-term sustainable business together.
That's fantastic. I think most people should go back and rewind and re-listen to that. I think, again, signs of this industry maturing and that you guys have already done this is that, this is a partnership, make it work for everybody. And that's how it's going to be the best for everybody. Adam, thank you. This has been a fantastic conversation. That's understating it. This has been phenomenal. I like to give room at the end for my guests to give a handoff. However you see fit. How can people get in touch either with yourself or Core Scientific at large? Please point the audience in the right direction.
Sure. So we have an email address if you want to reach out to us, info@corescientific.com. You can go to our website, corescientific.com, and you can check out our Twitter page at Core Scientific. So multiple ways to reach out to us if you want to find us. We're not hard to find.
Awesome. We'll link to all of it in the show notes as well, so that people don't have a hard time finding you. Not that they will. I think everybody knows who you guys are. So Adam, again, thank you. This has been absolutely fantastic, and you take care.
You as well. Appreciate the time, Ben. Thanks.